The thing about making a porn movie is you can make that movie independently, become filmmakers just by doing it. This is a movie that I think not a lot of people know about. It's such a different style than American films. It's not possible to be less like a book than this movie is. Those scenes hold up as like some of the best death scenes in any movie ever. But it's also one of those movies that if you watch it today, it's sort of like perfect. Well, this is the kind of store that I grew up learning about movies in. So this is a real thrill to be here. You know, I've been in these all over the world, and there's so few of them, as you know, anymore. So to be in some place like Paris, where I don't live, and to still see this is really inspiring and really great. But I'm from a relatively rural suburb, so there's not a big film community. But it was a store like this that was organized by a director. It was an amazing collection, and it had so many movies that I never knew existed. And they had a thing called 5 for 5 Fridays. So for $5 on Friday, you get 5 movies and you'd bring them back Monday. That's what I would do, and that's how I got to see so many movies. This one's interesting because I did a TV show called Tales from the Loop. Nathaniel Halpern, who wrote that show, is really great and he's become a good friend of mine, and he had written this movie into my episode. This is a terrible quote, but I remember when we turned in the cut, there was one person who was commenting on, I really like the episode, I really like when that cheesy old horror movie comes on. And it was like soul crushing for both Nathaniel and I, because it was very indicative. But of course, yes, as someone who just made a Giallo adjacent sort of movie.
The Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
He's terrorizing Los Angeles.
Something like anything Argento, and certainly something like Deep Red and everything is sort of burnt into my retinas. The idea of like the black gloves and the knife and the sort of stylized violence. And there's so many great shots, especially in Deep Red, of you know, this sort of coming down the hallway in silhouette and things like that. You know, Italian movies, I didn't know anything about that. So the first time I saw them, it's such a different style than American films. It like really blew me away. So in many ways, part of MaXXXine is kind of my enthusiasm for those is on display. Here's the crazy thing. I've never seen this movie. I've seen all of his other films, and I don't know why I've never seen this movie, but I've never seen it. He's a great filmmaker. I like all his films. Somehow I must have been making a movie when it came out, and then it just got away from me. So I will take this home with me, and I will watch it, and I will report back. This kind of like narrow hallway is very much what it was like at Cinema Video. Is a really cluttered place. Kiss Me Deadly. It's a really great film. One of my favorite, if not my favorite, film noir movies. Has influenced me and probably like countless other filmmakers. One of the first film noir movies I'd seen, maybe I'd seen Double Indemnity before that, but it was one of the first ones because it has this strange sort of sci-fi, supernatural bent to it.
She's passed out. I'll bring her to.
If you revive her, do you know what that will be? Resurrection. That's what it will be.
And it's the first time where I kind of understood what film noir was, as far as where the main character wasn't a great guy. And it was really apparent in this movie. You know, it has the very famous suitcase that opens up with the mystery of what's in the suitcase. And it was very expressionistic in that way. And I had never really seen anything like that, especially in what I would call, like as a kid, an old movie. And so it was one of the times where I saw like an older movie, and I really felt that the ideas in it were very fresh, and they were just as modern as anything else. So I haven't seen this in several years, but even just the opening, it opens with her running down the street and everything, and it just throws you right into it. And it has a really wild ending. So if anyone hasn't seen this, definitely check this out. So obviously Psycho.
She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
Psycho is, it looms very large over all 3 of these movies. Probably everyone watching this has seen this movie, so there's not too much to say about it that they don't already know. But for me personally, when I was a teenager, I had a film history class in my high school, and we watched that movie. And I think I had seen it before, and when you were a kid in the States, if you went to Universal Studios in Florida, they had a Hitchcock, it's not fair to call it a ride, but it was an entire Hitchcock experience where they showed you how they made the shower scene and how the edits worked, and they would pull someone from the audience and they would dress them up and they would do it and they would film it in front of you, and then they would do like a North by Northwest hanging off of the the mountain, and they would show you how they did forced perspective. And there was all of this really great interactive stuff about how filmmaking worked. And that has now been replaced with a Shrek ride. But one thing, slight memory about that is they had a really cool gift shop. You could buy this, and you could buy like Bates Motel slippers and things like that. And so I always had slippers and a little do not disturb thing on my door as a kid. But this is one of the first movies that I think I intellectually thought about movies, because it's one of the first movies that I knew that was even a thing that could be done. So I had a really great teacher who talked about how there was a reason he picked black and white, and the idea of what like a MacGuffin was for Hitchcock, and the idea that you could make a movie and then with a movie star in it and kill them off halfway through the movie. I also am very charmed by when that movie came out, it was such a phenomenon, and like that happens so rarely anymore. So whenever there's something and you see the lines around the block and you see people saying don't spoil it, and his showmanship, but it's also one of those movies that if you watch it today, it's sort of like perfect, and it always has been. So
I heard you shot twice in some iconic locations of him.
You're right. I forgot about that till right now. So yes, we did. So obviously for MaXXXine, we shot at the Psycho House. However, on my first film, which we shot in Pennsylvania, we shot on a farm and in a barn, and the kind of claim to fame of that place that the owner told me is that that's where they filmed Marnie, because that part of Pennsylvania is a big horse racing and fox hunting and stuff like that. And so you're right, I completely forgot about that. You've done more research than I have, but you're right that I'm now 2 for 2 in Hitchcock locations. So I will be going to the Mount Rushmore next, I guess. Also, this is pretty much a perfect movie as well.
The address is 10,086 Sunset Boulevard.
Which is maybe the best kind of Hollywood movie, and the sort of craziness that being a star can induce. And, you know, it's also one of those movies that forever growing up before I saw it, it was always part of like a montage of great films, and you would see that I'm ready for my close-up.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
But this is just like a real masterpiece, and it's my favorite Billy Wilder movie, and it's one of the best performances of a person portraying an actress, but it's also one of the best performances in any movie ever. These two movies, these 3 movies are kind of in the universe of where like Pearl lives. You know, Pearl to me was a movie that was about a very, let's say, demented character at times.
What did I do wrong?
Nothing. Calm down.
No! Why are you leaving me if I didn't do anything wrong? I don't understand. I thought you liked me!
I do like you. I just...
Tell me the truth! Why are you leaving me? What did you see? Why did you change?
You're scaring me, Pearl.
And I thought, I've never seen anything about someone who's mentally unwell, who murders people, but in a world like this.
As I expected, Mary Poppins practically perfect in every way.
And I always thought that was a really interesting way into a story and a fresh way into a story. Believe it or not, I wasn't thinking about this movie as much as people think. Like when I wrote The Scarecrow in, it wasn't really a reference to this, but because it's sort of a technical inspired movie, we've just gone with it. When it comes to just traditional cinema and like as famous as a movie could be, and someone wanting to kind of have a different life and go on a sort of adventure that may or may not be real like that, there is no better movie than this. And then this is a movie that I've always really related to, and also I put this Bette Davis quote at the start of MaXXXine, which kind of looms over it. And this is probably a quintessential example of her talent.
Now, when I'm very good and do as I am told, I'm Mama's little angel, and Papa says I'm good as gold.
But also in this weird way of her kind of portraying like the perfect role for her in a way. And so this is a really cool and really crazy movie. So I definitely recommend people check out all those. Mine is shout out to Sean Baker, good friend of mine, great filmmaker.
You let her just run away?
Hey, will you please just stay?
And I'm the one who's unfit? Fuck yeah!
He would love to be here, so if he hasn't been in here, make sure you have him in when he comes to France, because he will have a lot to say. Okay, good, yes, yeah. So, all right, Sean, you were here first.
Hello, I'm Sean Baker, and I'm delighted to be here at JM Video in Paris.
This movie was protested very extremely when it came out.
Regarde-moi. Je te regarde. Il vient bien quelque part, cet enfant.
Not the Godard movie that everyone points to. If you look very closely in MaXXXine, in the way background on one of the marquees, it says sort of "One Night Only, Hail Mary." Because MaXXXine is dealing with a lot of moral outcry about horror movies and satanic things and stuff like that, and there are characters that are protesting this film, The Puritan, that's getting made. It made me think of this movie, and it made me think of the outrage over this movie. And so I wanted to include it because I wanted to include it as a nod to his filmography in general, and the specificity of that movie, but also because in X, RJ is like, in my mind, was always a big Godard fan. So he's making, he's doing his best to make an artful porn movie, but he's very inspired by sort of the French New Wave as he's doing it.
Hey, how come you don't gotta film none of this in order?
Well, once I have it all in the can, I can rearrange it however I want.
No shit.
I actually intend on experimenting a lot with the film's editing, giving it a certain sense of the avant-garde like they're doing in France. It's classier that way. And it's a good trick to disguise the low budget.
I would say it's not my favorite of his films, but it holds a place in sort of 80s outrage culture that I think is I don't know if people even remember that anymore. So there you go, just to put it back into the ether. This is a nice touch. For me, the reason I thought of this movie and why I mentioned it in X is because the characters are from Texas. And the thing about making an adult film in the 70s is that if you wanted to be in Hollywood, how do you do that? You know, it's like someone almost has to allow you to do that. But the thing about making a porn movie is you could make that movie independently and you could find your own way of distribution. And there was their own theaters for it and things like that. So you could not only just build a business and do that, but you could become filmmakers just by doing it. And otherwise, there was a real like difficult bar to entry from Hollywood. And I relate to that because as someone who didn't grow up in any connection to the movie industry, as a kid, I can look at something like Raiders of the Lost Ark as one of my favorite movies of all time that probably inspired me more than almost any movie for a love of movies. I have no idea how people make that. In my mind, that's just birthed into existence as it is. But then there are other movies that I'm sure we'll see here that I could start to see, oh, a person made this. And so knowing that you could do it and you didn't need the permission of Hollywood, that's kind of what's inspiring to me about something like a movie like this. Ironically, it was not made in Texas, it was made in New York. Yeah, and it also was like when I was a kid, this was like the movie that everyone referenced as like the only porno movie that everyone heard of. So as like, you know, a kid coming of age, it was always like someone's stepdad had this somewhere. And so I don't know if I've ever actually seen the whole thing, but when we wrapped X, when the movie came out, A24 sent me a poster as a gift. So in our bathroom we have a framed Debbie Does Dallas poster. This is the art version. Yeah. So yeah, this is this sort of the non-art version and the art version of pornography. But a lot of the stuff Andy Warhol was doing is cool. But you know, again, it's like a bold move to make something like this and to actually put like real sex in a movie. And people certainly weren't ready for it. Oh man, you did do a deep dive. This one's like super random, but also a movie I watched a lot as a kid. This was also on TV all the time. I had no idea it was an Australian movie. I didn't, like, it was just a people on bikes movie to me. But when I was a kid, this movie was, I probably watched, I haven't seen this in like probably decades, but I probably watched it. And I, like, at the time, I didn't know who Nicole Kidman was. I don't think anybody did. Yes, the humble beginnings for sure. Another groovy one. Yeah, this one, this is like one of the best band movies. Actually, I would say, now that I'm looking at it, this probably inspired a little bit of MaXXXine, the character. I didn't think about it until right now. Having watched this movie a lot when I was younger, there's an attitude and sort of a brattiness to her, and this sort of nobody in this shithole gets me kind of quote that is very in line with, yeah, I'm perfect and nobody in this shithole gets me is like a really profound line of dialogue. Repo Man. Owes a lot to Kiss Me Deadly. You know, has the suitcase in it, a different perspective on it, a more humorous perspective on it. But this movie has some of my favorite lines of dialogue in any movie ever made. It never gets old. It's a great satire.
Debbie, do you think it's too late for us to get romantically involved?
I think a little.
Here's a good Joe Dante double feature. This movie was one of the first movies I saw in the movie theater. And I really liked it. And I was also really amazed that in this movie, the opening is like the Universal logo, and then the camera goes into the world and lands on their street. And that blew me away when I was young. But I love this movie. This is another Mary Warnoff movie.
I'm Candy Hope.
Change it.
Change what?
Your name.
What for?
This is Hollywood. We change everything. We have to.
This movie, as the legend goes, which is like true and confirmed by Joe Dante, is that they wanted to make a film and they wanted Roger Corman to pay for it, which he notoriously did not pay very much money for. And so they kind of made a bet that they could make the cheapest movie ever made. And so what they did is they took a whole bunch of stock footage and a whole bunch of footage from other movies, and then they wrote a movie around it. So they would take a movie from the Philippines, a movie from a car race movie, and they would write a movie about characters making a movie, and then they would cut to those footage. And it's also about a young girl that comes to Hollywood and is, you know, trying to make it as a star. So this movie is definitely a big inspiration on MaXXXine and stories about Hollywood.
You're a fucking movie star.
And there's a lot of very, very funny moments in this movie and a culmination at the Hollywood sign. Yes, if I was ever to borrow from a movie, it would be this one, which then means I'm borrowing from all kinds of movies.
You also picked two Robert Altman movies.
I did. The Player is probably the more obvious one to talk about, only because it's a movie about Hollywood. So what's the story?
Well, I want Bruce Willis. I think I can talk to him. It's a story about a senator, a bad guy senator at first.
There's kind of a subgenre of Los Angeles plays itself type movies where Los Angeles is a main character and the vibe of Los Angeles is a main character in a film. And The Player is a great example of that because it's sort of this noirish story set in Hollywood in the industry world. Every actor that's ever existed is in this movie. And I remember when this came out, I was so amazed by that. It was just like, how are all of these people in this movie? And part of that is probably because they shot in Los Angeles and it's about Hollywood. And it's also, his career was full of so many ensemble movies that were so supportive of actors and appreciative of actors that I think just this is a good representation of everyone just wanting to be in his film and to kind of satire themselves and to satire the industry. This was, for me, sort of a great noirish, neo-noirish LA Hollywood private eye movie.
I want my money.
What makes you think a cheapie like me would have anything belonging to you?
Look, you're very famous. You got your picture in the paper. Everybody knows you.
But what I always really took away from this movie, and this is not like major trivia, but the fact that the score of this movie is in all different scenes playing either non-diegetically or diegetically. So if they go into a piano bar, it's playing on, the theme is playing on the piano. If they're in the radio, it's playing on the radio.
There's a long goodbye.
And that, it was this weird, for me, a way to think about movies where it's like, oh, you can really play with the form and you can kind of invite the audience into the illusion of a movie. And and John Williams did a great job with the music, but the idea to have it kind of reappear in different ways throughout the film it's almost like when you're watching the movie, you're excited every time you notice a new one. And that's a fun way to see the movie. This is a trilogy. This is the best one of the three, in my opinion. The thing about these movies is that there's kind of a subgenre, not even a subgenre, there's like 5 movies that exist in the seedier side of Hollywood. Okay. What's great about them is they kind of exist as a time capsule because there's so few movies that show Hollywood and Hollywood Boulevard and the kind of the sleazy underbelly of it.
When I was about 5, he'd take me to dedication ceremonies. He'd prop me up on his shoulder so I could see all the movie stars. Oh, God, that was the best time of my life.
When we were sort of researching how to recreate Hollywood Boulevard, you can look at news footage and you can look at documentaries and things like that, and that's helpful. But something like this, which is it's a relatively low budget movie, they're not actually changing the location very much for their film. They're just going out there and shooting on Hollywood Boulevard because it was a small movie in Los Angeles in the 80s. So in many ways, it worked very well at seeing like, well, what kind of lights were on the store? And what did the street lights look like? And what kind of clothes were people wearing and things like that? Because this is not a movie that was a big budget where they would have manipulated everything. And so instead of seeing this kind of grainy, hard to see documentary footage, random tourist footage, you actually get like composed shots of the era and you could be like, oh, they used to have this there, or these were the kind of billboards and things like that. So that movie was a really great reference point to sort of help recreate the Hollywood, the nightlife in Hollywood. This is a movie that I think not a lot of people know about.
Oh my God! Stop! Oh no! Stop, please.
It's a very depressing movie. It's a real downer, but it's really worth checking out because there's a lot of really great performances. Donald Sutherland and then Karen Black is really terrific in it. It's just a harsh movie. You know, it's very much like show business seen from a very brutal perspective. And as from a writer's standpoint, from an actor's standpoint, from someone who wants fame, it's a real bummer at the end. And it's just one of those movies that you kind of have to see it to believe it because it goes places you don't think it's going to go. But yeah, so Day of the Locust is a movie but I think a lot of people have forgotten about this movie. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's very rare that I mention this movie and people know about it anymore. This is a big part of why I believed I could make movies.
Have you disturbed our sleep? Awakened us from our ancient slumber.
You know, like I said before, something like Raiders of the Lost Ark may have gotten me very excited about films, but I didn't know how people made them. Whereas this movie, I could tell that someone just went out in the woods and found a cabin, and it was they were using their creativity to make the movie. They didn't have any movie stars, they didn't have a lot of money, but they had a voice and a point of view and a style. And because of that, you know, they could make a movie, and they could make a movie that's scary and exciting and entertaining, and got to know Sam Raimi a little bit, and he's lived up to all the expectations of being just a great guy, but also still has that enthusiasm that you know, everyone who grew up watching this movie like I did, you were like, oh, this like 20-year-old kid made this movie, and he was so excited about it, and he still has that today. And so this movie is, you know, this is a big reason I'm here. This is like quite literally a reason that I'm a filmmaker, because I had moved to New York when I was 18, and the filmmaker Kelly Reichardt she was teaching a class at the school that I went to, and she had made a movie called River of Grass that Larry Fessenden produced and acted in, and he had made this movie, and this movie had done well. And back to that cinema video place, this movie was a very indie movie, and no video store where I live would have it except for that one. So I had seen this movie because I remember it was like a strange vampire movie, an indie vampire movie. It had a good quote from, like, I think it was Playboy on it, that is actually like a great movie. And when she said, does anyone know what this movie is? I was the only one in the class that did. And so she said, oh, I'll bring him in to talk about filmmaking and to talk about what it's like to be a producer or a director. And then she never did. So I just kept bugging her and saying, like, I want to meet that guy, I want to meet that guy. And she eventually just was like, you know what, you're the only one, so here's his phone number. And so I called him, and we had coffee, and we got along, and then that became sort of a friendship that evolved into me sort of interning for him, and then that turned into him seeing my short films and liking those. And then when I was graduating school, when I was 22, he was thinking about making some like low-budget movies, some very low-budget movies. He actually used the quote that Liz Bender in MaXXXine says. He said, I'm trying to make like B movies with A ideas. And he said, so if the only thing stopping you from making a movie was money, what if I gave you a little bit of money? So he gave us $50,000, and we went and made The Roost, and which is right here in a very questionable box cover. So that started it from there. And then this movie really scared me. I think this is one of the best haunted house movies of all time. When I worked in a video store when I was in my teen years, and I didn't work at the good one, I worked at a not good one. It was called Super Video. It was a very bland video store, and I would just sit there and watch movies all the time because it was a pretty easy job. And for some reason, I had not seen this movie when I was like 15, and I heard some people come in and say, oh, that one's really good. And I really liked horror movies, and I was like, you know, how did I ever miss this one? And I took it home when I was like, 15 or so, and watched it, and it really freaked me out. And a movie hadn't scared me in so long. That movie left such a mark on me, and so then I would always watch it in the store. And then I remember that I would people would come in and they would want to watch a scary movie, like their kids would want to watch a scary movie, and the parents would be very stressed out, and I would say, oh, Poltergeist, it's PG, it's no problem. And then they would all come back so traumatized from the clown scene. But I felt like I was doing my duty as sort of a soon-to-be horror filmmaker.
I put also It Follows from David Wilbur Mitchell.
This is a really terrific movie. I mean, this is for the first time in a long time when a horror movie came out that you were like, ah, someone found a new way in. Because it's, as a horror fan, a lot of times you get the kind of same movie over and over again, and you may like it each time. I often like them each time. But this felt very fresh, and it felt like, oh, you found a new way to tell a horror movie. And so it's really one of the best horror movies of the, 2020, whatever the decade is that it came out in. I don't know, you'd have to ask him, but I don't really think too much about this sort of intellectual read of the movie while making it. So, I mean, I was certainly aware that I was making a movie that in X, typically speaking, the sort of liberated young people would be punished by the puritanical old people because how dare they be so transgressive. And I always thought it'd be more interesting if the old people were just jealous and resentful and envious, and they were punishing them out of just like their rage. And that's kind of where the idea came from. And so, any sort of like deep dive about the themes and about ageism and bodies and things like that, it's certainly in the movie. But I've never sat down and thought like, this is why I'm making, or this is this is what the reason behind it all is. And so I'd be curious if that, yes, it does sort of work as a metaphor for STDs and things like that, but I'd have to ask him if he's like, I sat down and was like, metaphor movie, or if it was just like, it kind of evolved out of the idea. In my case, a lot of it involved out of the idea of a fresh perspective in, but there is, I do see your connective tissue there. This movie obviously is one of the all-time greats. You know, it's funny when X came out and everyone, you know, mentioned this movie, the movies themselves really have very little to do with one another from a story standpoint, but the impact of this movie is so massive that as many years later as it is, A Movie in Texas with Kids in a Van is related to this. That's just like how powerful this movie is. But the funny thing is, when we were making X, for any sort of references or things we would put up on the wall to say like, this is the kind of mood, this is the kind of aesthetic, things like that. I don't think we ever had a single image or a single thought of this movie. It was much more things like Two Lane Blacktop and like very Americana 70s movies. But maybe it's because this one is just in everyone's brain. You know, it's like no one needs to be reminded of it. And that's, again, a credit to just like how powerful that movie is. Oh, here you go. This is like a perfect film.
Where are you going? Amarillo. Your luck.
It's a divisive film in the sense that it's either like a perfect film or it's a movie that nothing happens and everyone hates. But I think this movie is like as good as a movie can be. And I don't know why. I just feel that about it. Like, I can't really articulate what it is about the movie that I love so much, but I think this movie's out of print in the States now, so it's hard to come by. I could be wrong. Maybe it's back, but it did go away for a while. This movie, also, I think one of the best movies of all time.
You got a helmet? Oh, I've got a helmet. I got a beauty.
I think as a movie that transitioned Hollywood from failing to figure out how to make movies into sort of young people like being like, let us show you how to make movies for people, for using music, like popular music of the day, in a way that movies hadn't done to the degree before.
In its clear and jeweled waters, and if you think I'm ready.
To a sort of auteurist, borderline experimental style, to sort of avant-garde editing and things like that. And then it's also just sort of very like poignant of the time and sort of the two generations and the sort of the hippie generation and things like that. But this is a movie that anytime I put it on, I'm always like, ugh, this movie's really good. And it kind of levels up, and it was made in such a way that to try to make a movie this good is sort of really, it's like inspiring and determining and also kind of depressing. This, I think, is one of the best horror movies ever made. Not a controversial opinion there.
Here's Johnny!
This movie also, like The Changeling, I saw this when I was younger, and the two little girls just like totally fucked me up. And The Woman in Room 237, I just like for a big portion of my life. And then the two little girls, I don't know why they freaked me out so much, but they really just like were burnt into my psyche. And then also like there was a scene in Candyman where they find this little kid in a bathroom, and that scene really messed me up because I was like maybe a little older than that, but I was close enough where I was like, ugh. I've never really seen like a kid hurt like that before, and so those are very traumatizing movies. This movie is, I think, a really underappreciated Spike Lee movie.
Oh my God! Oh my God, Richie! Oh, I'm sorry!
You know, this movie was kind of a bit of an inspiration in the sense that this movie, the backdrop of this movie is a serial killer, very famous American serial killer.
The son of Sam Killer, who has been targeting young women with shoulder-length hair, has caused panic-stricken brunettes.
But it's not really the point of the movie, it's sort of the setting of the movie, and I always felt like that was he did it especially well in this movie. There's also just some really crazy performances in this movie, both from John Leguizamo and Adrian Brody, and I think it just shows New York at a time that I find really interesting, and it's a really great film. And I had an acting teacher in college, and she's in this movie very briefly, and that kind of blew my mind because the person I would see at school was then in a movie that I saw in the movie theater. Much like Evil Dead, these two movies are kind of how I figured it out. I had seen this movie when I was young, and it was just sort of like a gross movie where people puked in a bowl and then drank it. But when I saw it, once I became interested in movies, it was the first movie I really understood how it was being made. I could tell that it was a person and their friends, that they weren't professional actors. I could tell they were in a place that had nothing to do with Hollywood. I didn't know where Wellington, New Zealand was, but I knew it was far away. And I could see that they put the camera on a car, or I could see that they probably put it on a ladder, or that maybe it was just taped to a stick. And so because I could see how he made the movie, I didn't know if I could do it that well. And I mean, he like made the mask and everything, he's a genius. But like, I didn't think I could do that. I don't know how to make the guns out of like scrap metal that he knew how to do. But I could see how the movie was constructed, and that kind of democratized it in a way where I suddenly now realized like, this is something that a person can do. You know, you don't have to have permission, and other people don't do it for you. You can just go out and make a movie on the weekends. And so that was a really like liberating movie for me. Paul Schrader's hardcore, Really brilliant film.
Any particular choice of girl?
You'll do fine.
This movie was on a lot when I was young, and it was really a lot of very memorable moments, memorable dialogue, similar to Repo, different vibe than, like a different kind of writer than Repo Man and Alex Cox, but similar kind of like quotable lines. It was an interesting movie because Susan Hubley, who's also in this movie.
Seems to me that you have been very naughty.
She has such an interesting perspective because it's this kind of puritanical character in George C. Scott who has one perspective on sex in the sex industry, and she has a totally different one. And hers is sort of an indifference, and his is sort of an indifference as well, that he's like uninterested in it. And there's a great moment where they have a thing where she says like, and I'm gonna horribly butcher it, but it's along the lines of like, you don't care about it, that you don't do it, and I don't care about it, so I don't care who I do it with.
You think it's so unimportant that you don't even do it. I think it's so unimportant that I don't care who I do it with.
And I think that's a really great, kind of like, it's a very Paul Schrader moment, but it's really great.
We pick also A Cure for Wellness because, obviously, of Mia Goth.
No one ever leaves.
What are you talking about?
Did you know her with this film in particular? Or?
I saw this in the theater. I had seen Nymphomaniac, and it's probably, prior to this movie, maybe Nymphomaniac was the only other movie I'd seen of hers. I think she had done maybe one movie in between. But yes, I saw this in the theater, and I think Gore Verbinski is a really very cool director. I haven't seen it since it came out, though. I should probably rewatch it. But I just remember her in a bathtub full of eels. That seemed very unpleasant to do as a person. You know, Mia is a very fearless kind of performer, and she will pretty much do anything for a movie, and so it's not shocking to me that she surely got in a bathtub full of eels. And then, coincidentally enough, when we were making X, we were shooting in a pond. It was a man-made pond. At one point, she was in the pond swimming, and she was like, "There's eels in here." And I thought, "There's not. This is the man-made pond. There's not eels in here." And like, it was like, "Oh, you're having PTSD from Cure for Wellness." But then there were eels in there, and I found out that eels can actually move across land to get into water, so that's how they got in there. And we found that out because when we were shooting at night, people started getting bitten by eels, and then we discovered there were a lot of eels in there. And so it went from being this very like civilized production of we're just shooting in a man-made, it's basically a big pool, to being like, ugh. And I remember we had to, Kid Cudi was the last person who had to go in there, and he had to go in there very briefly. And we were like, should we tell him there's eels in here? What if he doesn't want to go in? You know, it's like he's going to be fine, so maybe we just don't tell him. And so we didn't tell him, and he went in, and he was just supposed to go in and look around and come out. And then he was like, oh, something's swimming around in here. And we were like, no, it's nothing. And then when he came out, we were like, yo, there's eels in that water. He wasn't so happy about it, but we got the shot, and you know, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So this movie, I watched a lot as a kid.
I've seen you before. You're the asshole on TV.
That's funny, I was going to say the same thing about you.
This movie, if you've read the book, it's not possible to be less like a book than this movie is. The book is a very great book, and it's a very short book. I recommend to anyone. Each chapter is like 1 page long. It bears no resemblance to this movie whatsoever. So much so that I had seen the movie before I read the book, and when I read the book, I was like, it seems wrong that they called it The Running Man. That's how different it is. But in its own way, it's great because there's such a sense of now reality TV, but sort of showbiz to all of the action and all the violence, and that all the characters are in this, they're all on TV and they're all performing that way, and the stakes are very high, but they're still designed to be like TV characters. And there's something really, I don't know, ahead of its time about that. But yes, in many ways should have had a different name because it is nothing like, I mean, really nothing like the book. So yeah, this is Nightmare on Elm Street.
This is God.
What I love about this movie is when I was a kid, Freddy Krueger was like a celebrity. And so I had a poster of Freddy Krueger on my wall, and it was like him doing something like this. But what I think is so brilliant about this movie is it's borderline experimental in how surreal it is. And I think that gets underappreciated, and that it's not just someone going around killing people. The glove coming out of the water, sort of like Jaws in the bathtub, which people could relate to. It's a tongue coming out of a phone. It's someone being sucked into a bed. It's like the practical effects of someone on the ceiling, which really traumatized me as a kid, her screaming and being pulled around on the ceiling. And just Freddy Krueger as a character is so stylized. And as the sequels went on, he became funnier and funnier, which is kind of what made him a celebrity. I think that people underestimate just how difficult it would be to come up with a universal story like this, that someone could kill you in your dreams, and then to do it in a dreamlike way that's so iconic that today those scenes hold up as like some of the best death scenes in any movie ever. There's a reason that like great movies are great, and I think it's like visually as good as a horror movie can be. And then Scream, this is the newer version.
Yeah, I picked this one because of Jenna Ortega, obviously.
I see. Okay, and the directors of this are good friends of mine, and they're really awesome. We did VHS together.
If you're watching this, don't come here.
Okay, so I'll start with the Jenna Ortega connection then. So Jenna Ortega auditioned for X. I was unfamiliar with her work at the time. She did a very good audition and I liked it, and then I met her and I liked her. My friends were making this movie, so I texted them and said like, hey, what's this girl Jenna like? And they effusively was like, she's the best. And I trust them so much. And so like I was already right there, and then they were like, this is the best decision you can ever make. She's amazing. And so then I cast her in X. And we had such a great time, and she's so great, and she's gone on to do more Scream movies and, you know, take over the world in many ways, deservingly so. But then the original Scream, I had just gotten my driver's license, and it was the first movie I ever drove to the theater to go see. And as someone who loved horror movies, to be like 16 and have there be this strange meta horror movie, like something I'd never really seen before, that was commenting on all the movies that I grew up watching in a really clever way, and was also fun and scary, and used a very mundane Halloween costume. It was like the cheap thing you would see in all of like the pharmacies and drugstores. To use that in an iconic way, it was pretty brilliant. And like I said, it was the first time I was able to drive myself to the theater, and so I remember seeing it like 3 different times because I was like, I finally had autonomy to do things. I have a very like fond memory of those theatrical experiences. I love this movie.
We've got madmen putting scarecrows up front. God knows why. They have no pragmatic purpose to the show, but I'd like to keep the troops motivated.
A lot of times when I would make movies, I would show this to the crew beforehand because it's such a great encapsulation of what it's like to make a movie, because he's so inspired in the movie that he's making, and he also is not in Hollywood and is doing it himself.
Okay, action.
And I think that's very kind of the theme of what I've been talking about from movies like Bad Taste and Evil Dead and Habit and things like that, is that if you weren't part of the movie industry, there's this idea that you just won't. And here is someone in Wisconsin who has a desire to make movies and a love for movies and a passion and a knowledge for movies. And he's going to try to make this movie, and maybe there's a ceiling to what he can accomplish because of the budget and things like that and what is available to him. But his determination and his enthusiasm for it is at like 10 out of 10 the whole time.
Give it some passion. It's all right. It's okay. There's something to live for. Jesus told me so. You did it before, you could do it again.
And it's a really great example of how making a movie is a crazy thing to do and a life destabilizing thing to do. Everything that can go wrong goes wrong, and you're always having to adapt to it. On the surface, it's like a funny movie and things like that, and it can work as that. But I actually think it's a very profound example of just like what it takes to make a movie, and what it takes to make a movie if you are you know, in many ways carrying that burden by yourself and with your friends and your family and things like that, as opposed to the support of an industry.
Would you be interested in making a documentary one day? Or?
Maybe. I think that's the kind of thing, is you have to have the right subject matter to spend the time to want to do it. So I mean, I love documentaries. I watch them all the time, and so I'd be certainly open to it. But it's I think sometimes you have to kind of stumble across that. Like your life has to intersect with something where that would make sense.
Thank you very much,
cool.
Ty.
Yeah, A24 really holding it down in here. Yeah.
Konbini!